Oh, hold on a moment. Something's... There we go.
Hey.
Hey, welcome back to the Heart... Oh, hang on. Yes. Welcome to the Heart Journey Home podcast. I'm back again with my good friend, Matty Coonan. Matty, great to see you again. It's been a few weeks since we've seen you. How you been?
Yeah, been good. There's been a lot on. A lot of new projects starting and things. Yeah, it's a good time. It's nice and cold up here at the moment, actually, too. So
That's right. It's been coming down pretty heavy here as well. I think
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah, all the rivers are overflowing, and window. Yeah, no, it's nice time of year. My wife loves it. I don't particularly like the cold, but yeah.
Well, you work outdoors most of the time, don't you?
I do. Yeah, yeah. Unless I'm sitting in front of a computer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it can get a bit cold, get a bit frosty on the fingers.
I bet. Okay, so if you remember, back in episode 4, we were talking all about kind of your first forays into Christian faith, and your first couple of experiences with evangelism, and I think we spent some time talking about what is hope in the context of
Sure.
meeting people who may or may not get to know Christ as part of your first introductions to them.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. I thought we'd, since we've gotten kind of a zeroed in perspective on some of those experiences, that maybe we could get a bit more of a big... How did you go from that first experience of Jesus opening your Bible for the first time, or the first time you really, sat down with intention, to, the levels of evangelism that you're involved in now? We'll get to that part.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Gee whiz. Righto. Well,
it's been a huge journey for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been one of great fear, stress, and frustration. Actually. Yeah. With temporarily, and then with a good result, like and a great reward comes with obedience. So that's where I'm getting at is that. Yeah, evangelism is generally terrifying. Most people don't do it. They're Christians for a good reason. Those who do it often have to be taken a hold of by God and told to do it. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it either. So that's what happened to me. I met Jesus, and almost in the same week, the same moment, you could say that early interaction. Much of that encounter was immediately like reciprocal, if you know what I mean, like that love that he showed for me. He began to immediately direct me and not just in telling me what to do, but my affections, my heart, the way I began to see and what I was reading in the Bible. He definitely just directed that me in that path from the very beginning. So
let's slow down for a moment.
Sure.
Because I think maybe we're trying to bite off way too much. So early on, you said that your the affection that you were being shown from Jesus was something that you then had, and it was directed out towards others, and it was part of what you were picking up in your Bible reading that kind of helped direct you with that.
Absolutely. Well, definitely. After I'd read the New Testament, I walked, I laid the Bible down, and my overwhelming impression, like if there was one thing that I'd take away from it, was to help the poor. It seemed like when I read it, that was everywhere. And on rereading, like the Book of Luke, yeah, it is everywhere, but and most of the other one. So
it's still out.
but definitely stood out, and so a lot of that shaped, a lot of my that's who I met. I met Jesus, and I met Jesus, a man full of compassion who loved me, but also had a great deal of mercy on those who were lost and broken, and so some of the most broken people in society. He immediately brought my attention to. So that's when I met him. That's who I met, and it shaped so much of the way I think.
So early on, that like you're drawn to the
Mm.
poor, and you were filled with this kind of affection of God that you hadn't experienced. So how did things go along?
Well, I just began to pray, and I'd had a friend who I'd mentioned in our last podcast who was, he was pretty important in the whole scheme of things. He was the one who initially just brought up Jesus with me and stuff. So I kind of I just started to pray, and I just started to wait, and what I began to pray was, God, I feel like you want me to help the poor, and so just show me where they are. And so that was just a really simple prayer. Like, how do I start? What do I do? Like, it was almost like in my heart, I knew, I was supposed to go, but I didn't know what to do or where. So I just prayed and prayed, and then eventually, we got a newspaper article. It was came in the paper, and it was just an article of homeless people sleeping in Gosford, and they were on a porch of an abandoned building or something, and that was enough. We thought, oh, here it is. So off we went, and we just chased that story, and we met the guy in the paper actually who was laying there, and that led to an amazing journey. That led to us meeting a lot more people on the street. It led to us meeting and getting connected into the they're called Coast Shelter, and they run a homeless sort of breakfast, lunch, dinner. So they've got a kitchen. So that was cool to get in and begin to meet a lot of Christians on the street and from churches who are part of that, and also just out doing that stuff. So that was really cool. Cool. But our friend who I met was quite a chronic alcoholic, but we spent a lot of time with him. We just sat and shared with him and loved on him, and we gave him what he needed. We just asked questions, and we said, "What do you need? How can we help you?" And we just tried to live out what Jesus taught in the Bible, just to love people. And we developed quite a good friendship. There was me and my friend, and another girl had joined us at that time from a church, and eventually this guy gave his life to Jesus completely and got clean from alcohol, which was a miracle. We he was drinking significant amounts of alcohol. Like, we're not talking, we're talking just methylated spirits. Just drinking half a bottle. So this guy died on the street from alcohol. His heart had stopped. I think he died 3 times, and the ambulances had managed to revive him. So he wasn't just a normal drunk. This is a real fair income drunk, and so he ended up getting clean, and that was just over the time that we were with him, probably over a period of 8 months, just walking with him, praying for him. We were all praying for him at home, and then just things happen. God does miracles, and sometimes I think they're just subtle, and you can miss them. But
So what it
that
sounds
was
like,
super inspiring for us. We thought we had a victory. We're like, oh, no way, this works. Yeah, like people are drawn to God's love when you do it properly, and He's powerful, and he definitely meets the need of people in front of us. So that was that's all we needed to keep going.
so what it sounds like is that you had a genuine desire to be out there and involved, but you didn't have a blueprint to follow. You didn't have a program, but you went to where the need was already being met, and you thought, let's get involved here,
Yeah,
and you weren't positioning yourself strategically necessarily. You were getting to know people. You were
yeah,
going kind of without a plan,
yeah,
but being open to be like, how about you guys tell us what the need is, and we'll
yeah,
figure it out. We may not be able to do a lot of things, but we'll put ourselves out there at least.
yeah, yeah. I think also I met Jesus in the adventure. For me, adventure is a huge part of my wiring, and I think almost like from the beginning, because of the story that we had and the experience that we got to see. Um, sorry, I lost my track there.
You mentioned that God found you in the you met God in the adventure. What does that mean?
That's what I was trying to get at. So well, it was almost like it was ready. It seemed as if what we saw happen was planned already. Like we didn't just, like you said, we didn't plan it, but it was almost like I landed, like after I experienced and met Jesus. It's almost like I found myself caught up in an adventure, and I think
Mm,
there was a sense of that. And then after we'd met the guy and all these things happened, and all these like little miracles where doors opened, and you know what I mean, it left me with a sense like I can keep going with this. Like there's more,
mm,
and it's okay. Like I don't have to generate it because God's planned it, pre-planned that. So it also became quite a fun experience as well, although
mm.
terrifying and all the other emotions.
It's funny. What I've been learning about for the last couple of weeks is this notion that um, God often encounters us in a place where we've fallen off the edge of our map, and
Oh,
we
no.
can't rely on our
Mm.
familiar routines and what we know and everything, because that belongs to our old self. And
Yeah.
so if we find ourselves in this zone of not having a map, not knowing what to do, sometimes being confused and lost, sometimes being just trying to do something you've never done before.
Mm,
Not
mm.
only does God meet you in that space, and that's the precondition for him creating something new and novel,
Yeah.
but it's also where our old self can't follow, and we have to
Wow.
step out in the new self.
Mm,
And it sounds
mm.
very much like you were just, we got to do something different. We're going to step into that zone and we don't know what we're doing. But it was an
Yeah.
opportunity for God to kind of
Mm.
the draw out of that space something new. And that's where the adventure happens.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think what you hit there is like it's the main game. I think that's God's game from start to finish. These adventures, all this stuff. It's all about the heart. It's all about us, intimacy with Him,
Mm,
restoration. Coming back face to face with God, and He does anything to bring us to it. He sends me all over the place, and it's not logical, but it's an adventure, and it's designed for me. My journey's designed for me. Um, which is cool because I'm different to most people and climbing trees and jumping out of planes and fighting heavyweight boxers in the ring. All these crazy things God's put me up to. Um, it's just what I needed. I really
mm,
I needed a God to come alongside me like that and meet me and give me that. And
mm.
it just shows how unbelievably wise God is and brilliant. To and honoring of us. He loves us. So the way He made us, He's so honoring of how He put us together. It's brilliant. It's so beautiful.
Okay, so you're going to have to fill us in because you've just mentioned a few very different things
I've
that,
taken you on a wild. Well, I just
right.
mentioned some. I jumped ahead quite a fair bit there. Um, that's just that's a lead up now. I'll have to come back to that. But I don't know how we can go from where we're at to jump to that straight away. So
Well, let's
we,
start because I think all of those things that you just mentioned, they have an
yeah.
and they have an element of it was a gift that you
Mm,
got to experience these things, and it was
yeah,
evangelism, and it
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
happen overnight. There was kind of
yeah.
a
Oh,
journey
big time for
that
sure.
involved some of these experiences. So, like, tell us more about, like, you were going to these shelters and you were engaging with the homeless and
Mm,
those who are um, suffering from substance abuse and
yeah.
um, like how did your evangelistic um, process evolve from there?
Mm. Yeah, well, it's there was there's there's a perception the church has of how it should work, and then there's the real world. And there was definitely a lot of those real world eye-opening experiences. Because this is what the belief is. This is how they see it happening. There's a lot of beliefs in Christianity that we just don't talk about. That they're unspoken. They're unwritten beliefs. Just the way we think things happen, and often what happens in the real world, it's not necessarily what we think is happening in the real world. Anyway, yeah, there were times where you would just share something, and then just the extreme conditions of their life made it realize how silly it was, like what we were suggesting. It's almost like we came with a basket of fruit, but they needed a medikit, like actually needed a doctor, and we turned up with and so that's a bit of a metaphor of sometimes how I felt with some of the fluffy message that I was carrying, like, or what I thought, like, or it was just a transactional kind of a get out of jail empty thing, and there's just too much brokenness in the way of someone making what we thought was just a clear, easy decision, right? Like, just give up everything in your life, go into a new environment with new people who you completely don't know, and they're and we for some reason we thought that should just be the clearest, easiest decision for people to make, and we shouldn't necessarily have to change much. They can just get on board. Because I loved the people who I was reaching out to, I just refused to believe that, and I refused to believe that it was their fault. And I because I began to see the issues and the challenges that they had to try and make the jump to get into the church, and we weren't aware of it. Like little babies of turtles, they lay their eggs and only a few make to the ocean. I've seen that. That's so true. Someone will receive the word and begin, and then they'll get cut off at the door. And it's sad. And I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I'm just, it became a huge motivation to present a message to people, like it's good news for the poor. it,
Mm.
and it wasn't like what I had wasn't very good news for them.
I mean, it's a great example. Like, we're Christians, we love you. Here's a fruit basket. But it's like we need a doctor.
We actually
We
need a
have like
doctor in
real
here.
needs. Yeah, and the reason we're out here on the street instead of in church is because there's this wide gap, and it's gonna take a process. It's gonna take a journey before we're even thinking about that.
Yeah.
And so what you're highlighting is that if you're new to this, if you don't, you can step out with all the good intentions in the world, but then you're met with the reality, and it's like, oh, my focus was on me being a good Christian and going out and loving the poor, but now I'm learning who the poor is.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who they were before. So how do you how do you act loving? Like, you end up just living out a performance of what loving the poor looks like in your own
for
head.
sure.
And it sounds like you had to go through a process of disillusionment with those, original
Absolutely.
ideas.
It was a facade, and it fell away, and it fell away in the natural process of life that we witnessed, and it's a good thing. It pulls back the layers, and it's a scary thing though, like it's a lonely place too. When you start to discover these things, not everyone wants to hear about it. Not everyone can even see it. People are blind to the environment that you're used to. It's a familiarity, and it is hard. But yeah, it's the love of God. The love of God has been the main. If I didn't have God's love as an experience, it kept me honest. It kept me honest, and that's probably where I'm wired a bit differently. Is the experiential love of Jesus has kept me on the right path, because it's meant that I haven't just just said, just given up on the too hard basket.
Mm.
You know, yeah, it's like we got to, yeah. So
So
yeah, just my message, it didn't work, and I didn't believe that because I'd read the Bible and I thought, well, no, Jesus has the answers.
mm. And
So
I don't
let's just
remember a
trust him.
fruit
Let's see what
basket
he can
being
do.
part of it.
Sorry.
I don't remember a fruit basket being part of his ministry.
But that's you know what I mean. They don't, because you can, you just don't understand their plight. You don't understand the situation of the homeless.
Mm.
It's brutal. It's so brutal, and everyone generally, we don't like to think about things like that because we can't do much about it, and so you can't. No one likes sitting in that sense of not really guilt, but sense of unrest and unsettled.
Mm.
But these people fall through the gaps, and a lot of them, it's the number one cause is domestic violence, fleeing homes, children fleeing homes, women fleeing homes, people,
Mm.
and ending up on the street, and they take drugs to stay awake to watch their kids and stuff, like things like this. People who've never done drugs take meth so they can stay awake to watch their
Mm.
kids because their family didn't help them. And that's a common story too. Families are often the least people to help people who become homeless. And they
Yeah,
meet people in the process and they become really good friends because they find out who people really are when they're in that situation.
yeah.
So,
I've been
mm,
volunteering at a counselling centre in Western Sydney,
oh,
sort
wow.
of a free clinic for the community, whoever needs counselling but couldn't afford it otherwise. And
Wow.
I've met a couple of people in domestic
Mm,
situations, and they're talking to social workers and legal aid, and they're trying to find a way of getting out of that situation. But
mm,
sometimes, their abusive partner is living downstairs, and they and the kids are living upstairs, and they can't
yeah.
move out because they
Yeah.
couldn't afford to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe they're immigrants and they have certain limitations on language or um, things like that,
Mm,
and then they appeal to the housing, um, and it's like, sorry, we don't have enough.
wow.
We literally do not have the resources to help people who
Need it.
are
Yeah.
reaching out for help. And it's like, geez, what do you do when you're, yeah. And so what you're saying is like the kinds of people who become homeless, we don't realize sometimes stands through
Mm,
no fault of their own. And in that
mm,
situation, it's extremely stressful and they're doing the best they can and they still end up
mm.
on the street.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, no, it's a fair dinkum issue, and yeah, it's I think it's good. It's good for us to be a part of. It keeps well, I feel hopeless, but I think God needs me to be in a place of hopelessness in one sense, in the sense that he's the only one who can really bring lasting change. And it happens in the heart, and that's why I love what you're doing, with your show, because with this, what do you call these again? I haven't done a lot of these, Andrew.
Let's call it a podcast.
Podcast.
Yeah.
I love your podcast because it's the main deal, and with evangelism, it shifts the focus a lot to all the exciting things and miracles and moments, but at the end of the day, it's the slow work of the genuine connection in the heart,
Mm.
and all of these things lead back to it. So.
You make a good point, which is evangelism comes from the word good news. And
Mm,
actually, here's the interesting thing, right? Um, I'm the word good news in the ancient context was a political term referring to when the heralds would stand up in some foreign country and say, the kingdom of Rome has now come to you. And
wow.
because of the generous, benevolent provision of the emperor, you now
Mm,
get all of these benefits.
benefits, yeah.
But
Mm,
preaching the gospel didn't just mean announcing it. It also meant demonstrating it, right?
Yeah. Well,
So what
yeah.
demonstrating the Empire of Rome looked like was, we're going to
Mm,
build aqueducts, we're going to build schools, we're going to build roads.
yeah.
Like,
They really saw the bread getting wheeled in on the wagons, didn't they?
that's
Like,
right. That's right. And so it wasn't just, oh, this Roman Caesar, it's like, what's he going to do for us out here? But it's like, no, you are now part of the empire, and we demand loyalty and we demand taxes and everything. But you're also part of this thing that we're doing, and there's going to be benefits, and we want to win you over that way as well.
Wow.
It's like the
Yeah.
iron fist on the one hand, but the open hand on the other.
Yeah,
Now,
that's right. It's like it's our way or no way, but we are kind. You
right,
can get
right.
involved.
So when the early Christians adopted this notion of preaching the gospel, it's like Jesus is the real king of a spiritual kingdom, but we're not just saying it on street corners. We're demonstrating what Jesus' kingship looks like, right? And that's where you get these pictures of early Christians helping the poor
Yeah.
and healing
Yeah, it's
people.
good.
And I remember learning a bit of history at some point, and what they said was, for the first 70 years of Christian history, they were focused on the two things that no one else in the kingdom was doing. One of them was helping the poor, helping the sick, helping the infirmed, right? No one else wanted to deal with that, especially if you're not connected to any group or
Yeah.
tribe. Some people literally got abandoned and said, sorry, you're on your own, you're probably going to die. But there was also this thing that we've heard about in China over the years, which is there was an abandonment of infant girls that happened sometime in the possibly late first century. I'm not super familiar.
Yeah.
And so the Christians would go out and find these baby infants and adopt them,
Yeah.
right?
No.
But here's the fascinating thing about it. Like, they're doing it out of this genuine will that all people are made in the image of God, and this is what God's kingdom looks like, right? But what happened in after several decades, after like 70 years or 100 years, it was the Christians who had a monopoly on healthcare. They were the ones who were good at it. It was the Christians who had all the women. So if you wanted to get married, you had to convert to Christianity. At least, like, some historians might poke holes in this, but that was kind of the impression that I was given a couple of years back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think God wants to reel us in with goodwill, and it's only down the track that he's like, there was a strategic element to that too.
Yeah. And it's
Like, there's
yeah.
reasons we're doing this.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's for me, it's like a husband courting his bride. When we separate that, when we separate, when we start to talk about authority, and when we start to talk about submission and those sort of things, when we separate it from that relational context, it quickly becomes just hard and we're really just false, controlling, manipulative.
You're saying that when you lead with strategy, you're trying to take your own plans and your own preconceived ideas into that space that's meant to be an adventure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if it's just like, you need to do this, like you should obey Jesus, you need to give your life to Jesus, that's exactly the opposite way, or the exact opposite spirit that he would say that. It may be similar words, but it's the opposite spirit. We yield to him, our hearts surrender to him because of his love and his generosity and his goodness. So if we say on behalf of God to someone, you need to surrender, they don't have any reason to do that. I would say no. And most people would say no. And that's how we've done evangelism. We've
Mm.
interpreted God only as a ruler, which he is. But he's much, much more than a ruler. Yeah, he's the ruler of our heart, first and foremost.
Mm.
And that's my experience. I just saw his face. I just saw him smiling through my spirit, and but I see that's a common thread too in scripture. In fact, there's one woman in John chapter 4 who changes the world, and very similar experience. She didn't know much. She was on the outside. All she had was an encounter with Jesus where, the God of the God who sees me, that's who she met.
Mm. Now, we could talk about this for literally ages, but you mentioned boxing.
Oh,
What
yeah, well,
what was that?
well, the journey. So I'll try to move from the journey as it was, where we're just talking about the first time we'd been out and we worked, helped homeless people.
Mm.
I actually became a youth pastor, youth leader, with the church I was at in 2011, I think.
Mm.
So I 2008, I met Jesus. The next day, I was almost reaching out to homeless, and then after a few years, I made my way to this church in Womble, whom I'm actually currently connected with, who are good friends, close friends of ours. Yeah, and it was a few things happened at that church. I'd done a course on supernatural, and met a few good people there, and began doing the youth leadership stuff. And so started the youth group, typical youth group, except it was not. I didn't want all the smoke screens and all the music necessarily. I just wanted to get the group together and just ground them in love and just ground them in who Jesus is, what he's like, and what he wants from them simply. And we just made it really open, and it was very non-structured, and it was just connecting. And so we had lots of fun. And then what happened is God gave me a real heart for the young men, for the young boys who were growing up. And the girls, I think a bunch of the girls had moved on just all of a sudden too. So I was left with just this group of boys, and I thought they're like 17, 16, 17. Well, I think they were like 14, 15, 16, 17, within that range. And I was just left there going, what can we, like, again, the kingdom of God has come. What does it look like for these kids? What do they need, right? And it soon sunk in that they were just at that impressional age. They just needed mentors, and they needed positive mentors, and they needed to learn. Well, it was really important to get a job. I thought the first spiritual thing that they needed was a job, or at least begin the process of thinking about it and then trying it out. And so what happened was the youth group became a work experience program, which is where the chainsaw originated. And through that program, we added some. It wasn't just work experience program, but it became a journey into manhood, like a rite of passage journey. So we'd take the kids and we'd take them to work, but then we'd also do other stuff like boxing, and then we had this. What do we call it? The initiation, where we had a ceremony at the beginning of the journey. It was about 8 months, and we stood them up and we said, all right, they're men now. We received them as men, and we got the community around, and they all come around and laid hands on the kids and just gave them wisdom and advice and just said, hey, we just accept you now into the community of men, and live up to it, basically. And then we just took them on these fun things. The initiation was skydive, and that was what we felt in our heart to do. And so we took the group of kids that we'd had, and it was great. It was really good fun, and I think it meant a lot to them. And I've seen that do a lot. There's a lot of young boys whom I've seen when when they reach a certain age, and when you take them aside and you say, "Look, you don't have to prove anything now. We accept you. We see that you're a man," and have that discussion, which is it's quite common around the world. It does wonders. It really takes Takes the stress away, I think, from a lot of boys who feel like they have to prove it. They don't know what it means to be a man. No one's told them, and their dad's maybe not been really clear either. And so, if you deal with that issue, it does wonders to help them to just relax into who they are, and they don't. Yeah, and then just celebrating them. It's just fun, and the idea is just to basically just be speaking into their life, who they are, and strengthening them in a community. And because it's at work, it doesn't have any of the common things in Christianity and stuff that we might be slip up on, or might be difficult. So get a bunch of kids, take them into the bush, and give them a chainsaw. That's pretty much that was the idea. So that's what we did, and it included jumping out of a plane.
It sounds like I'm starting to see a theme here. It's like the impression that I get for a lot of ministry programs is that it's the program that comes first. We're going to create a container. We're going to run some, framework. People are going to come and they're going to engage with that framework. And then the event is over, and hopefully they come back to the next event.
Yeah.
And that could be, ministering to the homeless, or it could be putting on an event that is attractive to young people. And so they come and, maybe they get preached to, or maybe we play some games, and maybe there's some spiritual lesson in it that they can draw from. And it's all very well intentioned. We want these kids to be off the streets. We want them to create positive associations with faith and church and all of that sort of thing. But I think over the last couple of decades, people have looked back on how we've done that in churches and noticed, hang on, like, these kids aren't staying in church, or maybe faith is actually quite superficial compared to what we want them to have to adulthood. But what I see as the common for what you're describing is there was no separation in you and the people you were ministering to. You were keeping a distance using these frameworks. You actually stepped in to the uncertainty, stepped to connection with these people, and in the uncertainty need here. Let's get to know these people. We don't know what it's going to cost. We don't know what the investment is going to be like. We don't have a plan, but we're willing to step into that messiness and try something. And it sounds like the security to do that didn't come from a framework. The security to do that came from relationship. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I guess it is. It is a bit easier for me to do that because I am quite wired that way. I think people tend to either be, well, this is a little bit maybe black and white, but I've noticed that some people are focused on people and some people are focused on tasks, generally speaking. And you need both, and it's great. But I've always just been a people-focused person. So if I walk into a room, I'm not looking at the seating or the chairs. I'm looking at the people who I'm conscious of what they're thinking or doing or talking about. So for me, I guess it wasn't a stretch. So it was probably, my dad was a great example for me. He was very relational. So I took a lot, I think, from my dad earlier on, just watching the way he was with people and the way he spoke and the way he could entertain a crowd, and he could use his words to do more than just communicate. He could make people feel wanted or known. And I really have a lot of value for that kind of a thing. So wasn't a big stretch.
Did you come in contact with like other people joining your ministry or people doing other ministries that maybe didn't have that quality?
Yeah, I think a lot of pastors don't have that generally. that skill set, which is fine. They've got a big job to do, often very task orientated, because they can do, there's a lot of tasks and a lot of people to organize and stuff, which is great. So yeah, churches generally, it could be a little bit tricky to talk to the pastor at times. But yeah, otherwise, the people you meet on the street were always the easiest to connect with.
So we're talking about connecting with people. We're talking about being willing to step into the unknown where other people are, and from meeting them, from connecting with them, finding ways forward with them. It actually, to be honest, it sounds a lot like how I do counseling. Like, when someone comes into my counseling room, I don't know their story. So they tell me where they're at. They tell me what problems they're facing. They tell me what they're having, what internal conflicts they have. And I don't have a kind of external framework that I'm importing. I meet them where they are, and we look around kind of in this proverbial forest, I guess, and say, all right, so how do we get out of this maze? Right? How do we get unlost from where we are? And I'll, and together, we think of a way forward, right?
That's
or
brilliant.
I'll suggest, I'll ask questions and, suggest sort of activities that might get things moving. And before long, we're out of the woods, and we're on the path. And the person starts feeling like a sense of hope. It's like, oh, I'm not lost in the woods anymore, or at the very least, I'm not lost alone. And you're
well,
that's
such a big thing, right?
Yeah. Do you feel like
I think God does it on purpose. I think God, I think the gospel and what we're evangelism, it requires learning, and I think He does it on purpose by sending us, if so mission trips, for example, or missionaries. God takes a hold of people and He sends them overseas, right? And so the first thing they need to do is learn. They need to learn where the place is. They need to learn about the people. They have to learn the language. They go into student mode, and I think that's the mode we're supposed to live in. And I think the context, it's more important to be humble and, like you're saying, to be weak and be connected than to be sure of yourself and disconnected. And what you do that, you've discovered it's the only way your job works, right? And I think it's the same with evangelism. You have to learn. You have to be willing to lay down and let go of your pride and walk alongside people and genuinely. But if you love people, that you'll find that's actually the most effective way anyway.
I think what I've seen in counseling is some counselors, they take really well to having, they're what we call evidence-based programs, and psychologists will do this and some counselors will do this, and they're like, we know the steps, we've studied this, we've developed concepts and frameworks and workbooks, and all of that stuff is a great resource. And some people respond to that really well. It's like, just give me the answer. I'll get through the boxes 1, 2, 3, and 4. But there are other people, and there are other counselors, where that feels confined. It may apply to someone who's on the path, but it doesn't apply to someone lost in the woods.
Gotcha.
And so they need someone to meet them in the mess, in the ambiguity, and is able to kind of improvise a novel perspective or solution that is outside of the existing frameworks. And I think a lot of Christian faith in the modern era sort of transformed into what's the most effective systems that we can test, that are effective, that we can replicate.
Yeah, and I think Christianity just tends to be quite organized. Like it happened to Israel too, like they had the most complex legal system in the whole world. They and when it's good, but when it goes bad,
Like, I think the problem with having a highly organized structure, that can take you a long way.
Oh,
That's a huge
absolutely.
asset, having
It's yeah, for sure.
something happen, right? People running things and problems, they don't know how to improvise. It's like, where is it in the manual? What's
Yeah.
contingency B for problem A? It's like, don't have that novelty, right? And so I think what we're kind of circling around is this notion that there is a things oriented versus people oriented approach to things, and I think it's very, very close to what we talked about
Yeah.
last time, this left brain thing,
Mm.
where it's like, are you comfortable enough with the uncertainty to create and innovate and improvise, or do you need structure and planning and systems? And the answer isn't one or the other. The question is, what am I called to, and what's most appropriate for this situation?
For sure. And as and I think we just tend to read the Bible individualistically. When Jesus says you, we hear me, single, but most of the time he was saying you, plural, group.
Yeah.
And I think we still haven't given ourselves a break because we're still probably down on ourselves for the things we can't do. When that's okay. That's step one. Step two is get over it and find people who can and just connect.
Yeah.
and be the family, be the strength to each other. And
absolutely. Now we're quickly running out of time because, like, you've got places to go and people to see, but I wanted to, since we're sort of talking about different expressions of evangelism, and you mentioned the homeless earlier, like, can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the evangelistic type projects that you're involved in at the moment? I know there's one that you've been working on for more than a couple of months already.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so Blue Torch is the name of what we do now. Blue Torch is just a Facebook page. We set it up because we sat down with a council and a bunch of other organisations in town who work with the homeless, and it was a day, and it was information day, and they shared on the causes and the statistics and recent findings in everything homeless. And they made 2 points, which they said, apart from not having enough houses, which was one issue. I think they were trying to get the state government to repurpose buildings because there's a lot of them anyway. But the two problems which they brought up, which I thought I can solve that, were that people don't know what to do if they become homeless. The second thing is, when they do become homeless, they don't know where to go. Oh no, sorry, I said that. Said the same thing twice there. The second thing, sorry, was the community don't understand the issue, and so they judge people on the street wrongfully. And more importantly, they just don't show compassion because they just don't understand. So most of the mindset when you see homeless people generally is, oh, what have they done to get themselves into that? And if they see any sign of drug use, the drug's always the cause, not the tool they're using at the current situation. Which is hard. That's just really hard to be someone in that situation because everyone's against you now. Everyone turns away from you quite quickly. Anyway, so they didn't know what to do, and the community doesn't understand. So I thought, right, I'll make a Facebook page, and I'll kill two birds with one stone. I'll just start telling people over the Facebook through ads. So my business was able to sponsor the cost of the advertising for this, and we just started telling people what to do. We said, this is what you need to do, and we just started fostering a compassion in the town for the issue through just communicating. Where do you go? Who do you talk to? What's necessary for you in this situation? So that led us on to other things where we thought we're not doing enough to support people in the event of becoming homeless, um, like instantly or outside business hours. So if it's domestic violence, they could have to flee at any time of the day. And so we thought there's nothing open on the weekend. There's nothing around. So I thought, well, we need to have something available as soon as someone becomes homeless. The minute they become homeless, they can someone will direct them, or they'll find some direction that leads them to Blue Torch, and we will be able to tell them if it's too late to get them into a hotel. We can tell them the location of a care pack, a homeless emergency care pack with 19 different items in it: a phone, a solar powered charger, a beanie, a torch, a massive jumper, a emergency sleeping bag, along with all your toiletries, food, directions on where to go. And soon, another project we're working on is actually a book where we've just invited, I know I'm jumping around, but we've just invited anyone who's been homeless before. They can write in and tell us their story, and we're going to include the tips and the tricks and the hacks that they give us in a book. So we're going to dedicate a book based on what homeless, straight from the horse's mouth, which is exciting. I'm really excited about that. So that's going to go in the pack soon. And so that's kind of where we're at with that whole Blue Torch stuff. And we've made some great connections recently with places in town and council. And so it looks like we're going to get some good funding. And so we're going to be able to roll that out on a big scale now over the Upper Hunter, which is awesome. So I can't wait to see how that goes together, but we just still don't know how that's going to work. But I'm just convinced that I'm just convinced God has the answers. And if we love people and we genuinely want to help, and we're not going to walk away from an impossible issue, and we stay there long enough and we trust God, He'll give us answers. And if not, it just shows people a love that they've never seen before, a love that doesn't give up. And so if that's all we can communicate and nothing happens, then we'll keep doing that. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things in that I can see. First of all, you never thinks they're ever going to be homeless.
That's it.
You know, you start off, you know, in society, getting work, getting into relationships, and then years later, all of a sudden, you and your kids you're on the street, you don't have any connections, and you're off the edge of your map. You don't know what to do, and you're sleeping under an overpass, or you might be, you know, and this in the Smith movie, The Pursuit of Happiness. Guy, he has to work for almost nothing, and as an intern for Wall Street, and he's taking a kid, and the lowest in the movie was, you know, he and his had to sleep in a I think a subway closet or toilet stall, you know, and like we never know we're going to get there, and so like what do we do? I never planned for this, but what you said is, because we never think that it could happen to us, create this distance in our mind. So it's like, oh, those are less fortunate. They're not like me. You know, like I've got my act together. I've got a job. I'm being responsible. Those people, they're taking drugs. They're, you know, and so we don't even think, assume it. And you mentioned that if drugs are involved, presume that drugs put them on the street. They're not a desperate attempt to self-medicate the pain of being on the street.
Yeah, that's right. So many people say they just drink and get drunk so that wherever they sleep, it doesn't matter where they sleep. They can. It's just the solution. Yeah. And so many they didn't do it when they became homeless.
And I guess that must be really disorienting for people to have gone from being one person to now being this person. And this person on the street, possibly connected with substances, that person doesn't know how to get out of that situation. Who they used to be didn't think they'd ever be in that situation.
Yeah.
Who they are now doesn't know how to get out.
Yeah, it's so overwhelming, and the panic's real. You know, people find themselves homeless and they need to breathe. Like if someone was standing there, the first thing they should say is, hold my hand and just breathe. And literally, like, just that person who walks alongside, and just the simple, they don't even have to really know what they're doing much either. They just, what do we do now? What's the first thing we need to do? Take a deep breath. Okay, one thing at a time. That's what they all say. Don't think about tomorrow. think about the next thing you're doing, because they straight away, the overwhelmingness of the situation gets so big. And so they all say that when you ask people on the street, what would you tell people? And they say that, they say, don't get
Mm,
overwhelmed. Do one thing at a time. Take a breath. You're going to have to survive. And then you're going to need Wi-Fi. You're going to need a toilet. You're going to need water. Go to a public place. So step 2. And so this book's going to be so
mm,
helpful, because these people, are just giving us that information firsthand, which is so
mm,
vital to have, because then we can put that in the hand of people, and if you picked up a book and you just become homeless, it says here's a 80 people who are homeless wrote this book, and they've been where you are, and this is what they'll say to you.
mm.
Hopefully that's enough to also just encourage them a bit too. I'm not alone. There's other people. So
I've taken your own advice with this. Because part of stepping out of your own familiar territory and meeting these people is, in a way, they are tolerating the uncertainty and the pressure to resolve this, and then thinking, what's the next one? What's the next step? And before long, after what I expect has been a journey for you, made a pack, you've found a way of producing the pack and what goes in it, you've troubleshooted what goes in the pack and what actually turns out to be unnecessary, you've found people who want to align themselves with what you're doing and sponsor, and now you're sitting with people on the street or who've been on the street, designing a helpful booklet. Like, that didn't happen overnight.
That's right. It's taken time, and it's just that daily, so many things happen so suddenly and so quickly, but then other times things draw out and take forever. So it's just like, oh well, you just got to trust God in the down times and the slow times too, and it helps you remember, like, my purpose is not to do ministry. My purpose is to love Jesus and just enjoy him, be in relationships that are free and not controlled or constrained. And then our ministry will be a flow of our family and love. And so it's just trying to, when things are slow, it's good. It's just good to remember, it's not all about that anyway. Let's just chill.
I guess if you focus too much on the problems that you have an expectation to solve, it can be stressful, it can burn you out. But if you step back and you return to, hang on, I'm doing this because Jesus loved me. And I've got this love now that needs to go somewhere. And I'm looking at these homeless people like, what if I come back and rest in that place? And the homeless are on my heart. And there are these problems I don't have answers for, but maybe if I just wait there in the tension with the love, with God, then, whatever the next step is might occur.
Well, I think you got your best chance of it occurring, and you're seeing it if you're in that place of readiness. And for sure, I think God is so faithful in that too. And he loves faith. God loves it when God loves faith, so he must love it when we're in awkward situations too. Because it's the only time we really need to practice faith, apart from,
Now, what do you mean by faith? Because I'm sort of I'm someone who's sort of captivated by words. Sometimes we can use a word and just assume the meaning. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Because I guess I could explain two different definitions of faith in my own life, outworkings of faith, I guess, that would appear to be different. So one demonstration of faith is God speaks to me. I read his word, and then situations are not lining up with the promise. And I just, I don't look at the situation. I look at the situation and feel, well, that seems to be suggesting something different to what God said. But what does He say? So I can look back. This is what He says. Well, I'm just going to believe that, and that's true. This is actually happening, but I'm just going to hold on to this truth, and God will deal with that. So that's
Mm,
one definite. I guess that's one expression of faith. But then there's another faith expression which I have, which is a compulsion or a compassion, um, which often moves me to act. A faith, like I have the answer, like I know that this person. It's a different one. It's like faith that I know God will bring about the answer in this
mm,
situation or something. And I think two are different. One's stagnant almost, and one is moving.
mm. That I like your description of it moving. It's like one is that you come to a fork in the road and you're like, God told me that the way forward was this way, but it doesn't look like it. It actually looks like the path goes this, and you have to choose. Like,
Yeah.
well, do I trust what God told me,
Mm,
or do I trust my own eyes and my own reason? Like, and so that's one version of faith, and then the other one is something inside of me that has a
right.
momentum in a certain direction,
Right. Yeah,
and
that's it.
I'm being carried forward by some sort of flow,
Yeah. Yeah.
and either I resist that flow and I hold myself back from it,
Mm, yep.
or I trust that God's the one kind of pulling on my heart in this
Mm,
direction. And if that's the case, I know His provision will keep us going, not me.
for sure.
Is that
Yeah.
is that the dichotomy there?
Yeah. I think you got it.
Fantastic. Now,
Yeah.
I so love hearing your stories. We're looking forward to having you back sometime in the future. But just amazing, amazing journey you've been on.
Yeah.
You know, between you and God and being willing to put yourself in that space where you don't know the end, you trust that a way forward will. It's just
Yeah.
astonishing work.
Yeah. Thanks, mate. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, there's a lot to give thanks for. God's amazing. He's always been there, and he will continue to be there.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Well, thanks so much for this chat.
no
Look,
worries.
it's been fantastic. All the best, and I guess we'll
Good on you, man. Talk soon.
all the best.